Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alicia Rice, and I'm the Program Manager on the Training and Education team here at the MaineHealth Center for Tobacco Independence. I'd like to welcome you to our ongoing webinar series. This is one component of our Tobacco Treatment and Prevention Education and Training Program. It's sponsored by and brought to you on behalf of the Maine Center for Disease Control and Prevention, Department of Health and Human Services. This webinar will be recorded and posted to our website following the presentation today. We are offering one continuing medical education credit and one CHES credit for this webinar, and it will be sent to those who attend the entire session today. In order to claim your CMEs, you must have a profile in Cloud CME. If you already do, you will find your credits in your profile within a week of this webinar. If you do not have a profile in Cloud CME, you can find instructions on how to make a profile in the post-webinar email. And for those of you collecting CHES credit, record of your attendance will be sent to NCHEC after the event. And only those who registered for the webinar, connected via the Zoom link, and attended the full session will be able to receive CME and CEU credits, as we are required to verify those who attended the entire session. At the conclusion of today's webinar, an evaluation will appear on your screen, as well as be sent to you via email within 24 hours after the webinar. We do encourage you to take the time to provide your feedback. It's not only helpful to us in planning our webinar series, but to our presenter as well. So today's webinar is titled Protecting Pets from Secondhand and Thirdhand Smoke, Understanding the Risks. It's presented by my colleague, Derek Bowen of MaineHealth Center for Tobacco Independence. Derek Bowen has experience as a health educator facilitating evidence-based programs within the community, including the Freedom from Smoking program. Derek completed his bachelor's degree in community health education in December of 2020 at the University of Maine at Farmington and is currently pursuing the National Certificate in Tobacco Treatment Practice. Derek joined CTI and the Training and Education team in July of 2023 as a tobacco treatment and prevention educator. Before we begin today's webinar, just wanted to let you know that all phone lines have been automatically muted to help reduce background noise. We do, however, want you to participate in the session. Please type any questions that you may have during the presentation into the Q&A box, and we will address them as time allows at the end of the webinar. For your convenience, just a reminder that a copy of the presentation with slides will be sent out via email after the webinar. At this point, I would like to turn it over to Derek.
Awesome. Thank you, Alicia.
Absolutely.
And hello, everyone. So again, my name's Derek Bowen. I'll be leading you through today. Again, the subject at hand is protecting pets from second and third hand smoke. So I just want to start today with thank you all for being here and being willing to learn some new information. I hope you are all able to gather something new to share with your colleagues as well. So in today's webinar, of course, we'll be discussing what second and third hand smoke is, and how each of these can affect and harm household pets and animals. We're going to go over the agenda in just a moment, but I also wanted to point out, that if this topic is of interest to you, or if you have any follow-up questions regarding secondhand or third-hand smoke, or just want to learn more, I do have a previous webinar on our website that has been recorded and you're able to watch it anytime that discusses secondhand smoke and third-hand smoke a little bit more in depth. But of course, we'll be going over that today as well. But as you will start to see throughout today, you'll find that a lot of the effects between humans and pets, they do share some similarities, but they are different even depending on each household pet, as we will discuss later on. But when it comes to secondhand and thirdhand smoke, why focus on pets, right? And I'm going to be relaying this information to you all today, with the end goal being that this information will guide you to, of course, relay this to your communities, your patients, your clients, and peers to help reduce the use of tobacco products and help people, being tobacco or smoke free. And so if that's the end goal, why are we discussing pets? The short answer is people love their pets, people love their animals. And we want our pets, of course, to be healthy. If you're a pet owner, you know that you want them to be healthy as they can. You want them to live as long as possible, and that goes to the community as well. And it's more common knowledge, to the general public, and there are already laws, policies put in place to help reduce secondhand smoke in public areas in order to help limit exposure to the general public, especially babies, toddlers, and children, as they are at a heightened risk. However, when it comes to pets, there aren't really any laws or policies put in place, and it's not really spoken about when it comes to speaking on the risk and dangers of secondhand and thirdhand smoke. But as we know, many people love their pets as much as they love their children, and treat them as so. And you'll find throughout this webinar that secondhand smoke and thirdhand smoke exposure to various household pets decreases their overall quality of life, increases the risk of various illnesses, and increases the chance of premature death, raises their annual vet bill costs, and more. And so let's move forward and discuss this today. But before we do get started, I just want to mention that references to tobacco in this presentation refer to commercial tobacco use, not the sacred and traditional tobacco use by indigenous communities. So now we're just going to be taking a quick look at our agenda and objectives for today. So of course, as I mentioned, we're going to be starting by discussing and defining secondhand and thirdhand smoke and highlighting the differences between the two. I'll then present some national statistics and trends, as well as some other facts and statistics that related to secondhand and thirdhand smoke. We will then examine the health effects of secondhand and thirdhand smoke on various household pets, identify the various negative health effects that can arise among these pets, and then end with discussing some strategies to mitigate and prevent pet exposure to smoke. And then we'll follow up this webinar today with a brief Q&A, as Alicia mentioned at the beginning of this webinar. And so beginning with what is secondhand and thirdhand smoke, and I am going to start just by discussing some information on exposure. And the key takeaway when it comes to secondhand and thirdhand smoke is there is no safe level of exposure. Any exposure is bad exposure and can cause negative health effects. And this is true for both the human population and with our pets. The CDC states that any exposure to secondhand and thirdhand smoke can be harmful and have negative health consequences. And I do want to emphasize this because if any amount of exposure can result in negative health consequences, we have to take a moment and think about how much greater of a risk that these pets are facing. They encounter or could possibly encounter both secondhand smoke and thirdhand smoke in their comfortable, their at-home environments numerous times a day. While we'll get into these definitions in just a moment, but these pets experience secondhand smoke each time that their owner or owners or friends of their owners nearby use a tobacco product of their choice. And if their owners are smoking within the homes, the risk for thirdhand smoke exposure increases after each tobacco product use as well. And again, I'll discuss these more in the next few following slides, and starting with secondhand smoke. So secondhand smoke is the smoke produced from burning tobacco products. And so essentially whatever the burning tobacco product is, it is essentially that smoke residue that travels through the air afterwards, potentially exposing those nearby to all of those harsh chemicals found within the cigarette product or tobacco product and the smoke. The exposure then occurs when others nearby that individual smoking breathe in the air or the smoke that was, either breathed out of that individual smoking or from the smoke itself coming off of the tobacco product. And of course, today's focus is being pets, but secondhand smoke can really affect any animal that's outdoors, nearby, or indoors, being a pet. Most common, we have birds, squirrels, chipmunks, or other pets such as dog or cats. That if they're outdoors, just in the general public, they could also be affected by secondhand smoke. And it's been found that of course, there's no safe amount of exposure to secondhand smoke. And the most common places of exposure are within homes, places of work, near or in bars, restaurants, and casinos, and then multi-unit housing when it comes to secondhand smoke. And for secondhand smoke, it is almost impossible to know when you or a pet is a safe distance away from that tobacco user to eliminate the risk of exposure. If you are outdoors, the elements and the wind can carry these chemicals and toxins in the air a very long way and an unpredictable path. And so that residue and those chemicals can travel past us or our pets, and then all of a sudden we have been exposed to secondhand smoke. Smoking or using a tobacco product indoors only increases the threat of exposure, as there's not much room for that smoke and for those toxins and chemicals to travel, and it can consume a room very, very quickly. And when pet owners smoke regularly in their homes, these pets are getting exposed over and over again, as I mentioned, day by day. And it steadily increases their chance to become ill and decrease their life expectancy and quality of life. And I also did want to mention secondhand aerosol regarding to vapor products. And given that they are a newer product on the market, there isn't too much when it comes to long-term research to know its effect on pets, similar to humans. It's a very new product. It's emerged in popularity, very, very rapidly in the recent years. But I did want to include any information that I could. And so when it does come to secondhand aerosol, it is not just the water vapor that a lot of people believe. That aerosol is still full of harsh chemicals and toxins, and the risk of exposure is very similar to that of a traditional tobacco smoke. The CDC also states that electronic nicotine delivery systems, or ENDS, are products including e-cigarettes, e-pipes, e-pens, e-hookahs, and e-cigars. And each of these products are not considered safe for you, and the aerosol can cause problems for us and our pets. The aerosol from these products contain higher than the normal amount of nicotine and other toxic chemicals, such as formaldehyde. These ENDS products use capsules that can contain nicotine, and some of these capsules can be refilled by using a special liquid. Sometimes pets, more specifically larger breed dogs, can find these capsules and then bite them and break into them and get some of that liquid refilling solution. And they then ingest that. And so in on March 15th, 2016, a letter to the editor of the Journal of the American Veterinary Medical Association, the Texas Poison Center Network, had reported 11 cases of dogs being exposed to these ends or refills. And so remember that there's no antidote really to when it comes to nicotine poisoning. So if your pet or does get into an ends nicotine capsule or the liquid refilling solution, it is then the pet owner's responsibility to get them to a veterinarian or a veterinary emergency clinic as quickly as possible. And I'll discuss nicotine poisoning later on in this webinar as well. Um, when it comes to these aerosol products, there are ends-related fires and explosions, and this also can put our pets at risk. In 2016, the FDA Center for Tobacco Products reviewed and summarized reports from other U.S. government agencies the news media, and scientific articles about ends-related fires and explosions, finding that some events have resulted in life-threatening injury and permanent disfigurement or disability. Although there were no reports of pets being injured per se, that risk still does exist if a pet's nearby when one of these devices explodes. Pets, of course, they like to chew on things, and pets that chew on the devices themselves may potentially puncture those cartridges or batteries, or may inadvertently turn on the devices. And so that risk is still there for our pets. So we want to make sure that we're always keeping ends and all other products, other tobacco products out of reach of pets and, of course, children. And so next, I wanted to touch on what third-hand smoke is. And so third-hand smoke is defined as the residue that is left behind from the nicotine and other harmful substances from the action of smoking the tobacco product. This then absorbs into other surfaces like the walls, carpet, furniture, skin, pet fur, bedding, and more. Third-hand smoke contains 250 or more harmful chemicals found in tobacco product smoke, and it can stay on these surfaces for a very, very long time, up to multiple years. And I'm sure all of us have at some point been into a home or into a car that has that stale smoke smell. And it could be, of course, it could be home, car, hotel room, or anywhere else in an indoor area. And that stale smoke smell is the result of third-hand smoke, and it is simply that residue created from tobacco smoke. All of these harsh chemicals essentially recombine onto these surfaces and can be re-released into the air. Many of these stick around due to how waxy, oily, and sticky they are. And the more someone smokes in this particular environment, the thicker the buildup is going to be. And as you can see an example, that picture on the right, you can actually see where the old picture frames were hung up on the wall and the surrounding area has been taken over by that yellowy brown third-hand smoke residue. And always appears very sticky. It has that stale smoke smell. That is what we're talking about when it comes to third-hand smoke. This residue does carry an odor and it is very sticky and it's very, very difficult to completely eliminate from whatever surface it has built up on. In this case, looking at the picture is the wall. And so third-hand smoke residue builds up where people smoke most often, again, lasts for months or years on a particular surface even after one stops smoking in that area. So whether the individual moved, they didn't clean that area, and if it's left untouched, it will remain there for a very long time. And then nicotine, which is a major component of tobacco smoke, as we know, also likes to stick to things such as furniture, fabric, walls, carpet, and clothing. It also likes to react with different chemicals present in the air, like nitrous acid. Everyday items like gas-burning stoves, automobiles, and tobacco smoke generate that pollutant, which is nitrous acid. The reaction between nicotine and nitrous acid forms cancer-causing compounds. Some of these compounds like to stick to surfaces and household dust, while others get released back into the air as a gas. People and pets are exposed to this harmful compound by breathing in the gases or ingesting or inhaling contaminated house dust. People are also exposed by touching coated surfaces and then accidentally transferring the cancer-causing compounds from their fingers to their mouths. Like children, dogs and cats spend most of their time near the floor, where tobacco smoke compounds concentrate in house dust, carpets, and rugs. And so these dogs, cats, other pets can absorb these compounds through their skin, or they can actually inhale them through the contaminated house dust, or as ultrafine particles and gases that were released back into the air. Pets can also ingest tobacco smoke compounds by licking their owner's hair, skin, clothes, You can think of a pet owner who smokes as essentially another surface that these pets can be exposed to. Because especially dogs, cats, like I said, they spend a lot of time on the ground. They may lick their owners and they get exposed to that. So even if pet owners do go outside to smoke, if they don't smoke in the home, the pets can still be exposed to both secondhand and thirdhand smoke because it sticks to their clothing, it sticks to their hair and their skin. And when it comes to thirdhand smoke, because it is so sticky, as I mentioned, it's very stubborn to remove if it's removable at all. There was also one study that showed that even when smokers' homes were cleaned and prepared for sale post-move, third-hand smoke was still present in the dust and on certain household surfaces months after someone had last smoked in the house. And of course, as I mentioned, that can pertain to hotel rooms and cars. So buying a new car where that stale smoke smell, it can be really, really difficult to get that completely removed. And so now that we've talked about those definitions, we are going to be discussing how each of these negatively affect our pets. So starting by sharing some data and statistics pertaining to pets, as well as information on policies and laws put into place nationwide for the general population. After this, we will do a breakdown of the negative health effects on both secondhand smoke and thirdhand smoke on some of the more specific household pets, so including dogs, cats, birds, fish, guinea pigs. We will then discuss mitigation and prevention to help reduce the risk of exposure for our pets. And so looking at this first graphic here, this is a look at the state and a territory map that takes a look at indoor smoke-free laws for clean air. And so let's take a look at that key here on the bottom of your screens. And as we can see, the states in white have no law, designated areas, or separate ventilation laws regarding to the public areas. So being bars, restaurants, work sites, multi-unit housing. These states in the white are going to have a higher risk of being exposed to dirty air, which means being exposed to secondhand smoke in these areas. And there's a total of 11 states in this category. And then those states, the few in the light green, these light green states have they have at least one of the locations with 100% smoke-free laws. And what this states is that out of the states bars, restaurants, and work sites, one of the three has 100% smoke-free laws. And then there's, as you can see, there's 5 states in this category, and then we kind of work our way up. The one in that green blue color has 2 out of the 3 100% smoke-free laws, and then the ones in the blue are 100% smoke-free laws. And then looking at this next one here, so this is another map that was created by the CDC, and this one relates to multi-unit housing specifically. And so for this graphic, this states, the states in blue are states with no restrictions regarding smoking in the common areas of multi-unit housing. Unfortunately, the majority of our states fall within this category, the number being at 34 out of our 50 states, having no restrictions regarding smoking in common areas of multi-unit housing. The states in the darker green are states that restrict or prohibit smoking in one of the two, so either government housing common areas or private housing common areas, and there's 5 total states in that category. And then the states in the lighter green is where states restrict or prohibit smoking in both government as well as private housing common areas. And there's 11 total states. And I wanted to include this because when it comes to pets, of course, pets are going to be in these multi-unit housing areas. And with the majority of our country having no restrictions in both government and private housing common areas, the risk of exposure to secondhand smoke and thirdhand smoke just increases. And so looking at these continued statistics here, in the US, 1 in every 4 non-smoking adults and every 2 of every 5 children are exposed to the various harmful effects of secondhand smoke and thirdhand smoke. That is approximately 58 million individuals being exposed to something that is entirely preventable. And so if 58 million adults and children get exposed to secondhand and thirdhand smoke, we can just imagine how many pets are being impacted by this exposure as well. And as you can see on your screens, 1 in 5 adults are using a tobacco product regularly, and 66% of households contain at least one pet. And this does include, as I mentioned, when it comes to multi-unit housing, it includes owning or renting. And so both are included in the statistic. And so this really tells us that over half the homes have pets inside, at least one, if not more. And the chances of them being exposed to the danger of secondhand smoke and thirdhand smoke are very high. And so one cigarette contains 600 ingredients, and when lit, it can expose to its surrounding environments to over 7,000 chemicals, some including ammonia, arsenic, benzene, carbon monoxide, formaldehyde, hydrogen cyanide, lead, mercury, nicotine, toluene, and uranium 238.8. And so the list of chemicals that are being exposed to both us and our pets is extremely alarming. And so what we're going to be doing next is going over kind of a breakthrough of how smoking affects some of the more common and popular household pets. And so starting with dogs. And so dogs can develop changes in their airways and lungs that are like those found in people who smoke. So essentially, ultrafine smoke particles can activate the immune system of people, and the type of white blood cell in the lungs involved in this immune response is called an alveolar macrophage. And so the alveolar macrophages watch what comes into the lungs, and if they detect something abnormal, they essentially eat that to get rid of it. And so for dogs that already have breathing or lung issues, inhaling tobacco smoke can worsen their symptoms and chronic coughing. And so again, those alveolar macrophages, it's a special kind of cell normally found in the lungs and are the lungs' frontline defense against infections. And so they recognize invading bacteria, fungi, or viruses and send out help signals to other cells in the immune system, telling them to join that fight. And these macrophages also act as mini housekeepers because they either, they get rid of dead or dying tissue, other harmful products like particles of tobacco smoke, dust, plant pollen, things of that nature. And so when harmful things do get into the lungs, these macrophages are then recruited to roam around, look for, find, and get rid of it. And so people who smoke, therefore, have an increased number of alveolar macrophages because their bodies are constantly just trying to get rid of all of this toxin from the tobacco product smoke particles that are found in their lungs. And so dogs that are then exposed to tobacco smoke, they kind of get that same effect. You can find that they have an increased number of the alveolar macrophages, and some of which will contain black smoke particles, and it's likely for the same reason as humans. And so there's also, when it comes to dogs, tobacco smoke can affect a dog's length of their nose. And so why is this? Noses are essentially for dogs, they're big air filters. And have you ever dusted a dirty room and then had to blow your nose? Same for us. That's happens, and it's also the same when it comes to our dogs. And so the chances are that when this did occur, we had, kind of that black looking goo when on our tissue afterwards. And the hair and mucus in our nose kind of act like glue traps to prevent it from actually getting ingested into our system. They trap particles like dust, pollen, and tobacco smoke and keep them out of our lungs. So bigger no noses, therefore, will trap more particles, and this does hold true, especially in dogs. So kind of our long-nosed dog breeds, things like greyhounds, Doberman pinschers, and that are exposed to tobacco smoke have double the risk of nose cancer. Their nose filters, they kind of are working too hard for too long of a period of time, and their noses filter out a lot of inhaled tobacco product smoke particles, which can then get trapped in their noses, so less gets into their lungs. But unfortunately, this does put their tissues inside the nose and sinuses in contact with a lot of those toxic cancer-causing particles, leading to increased risk of nose cancer. And the short and medium nose breeds, like pugs, bulldogs, beagles, Brittany Spaniels, have a higher risk of lung cancer. And so why it's kind of the opposite, right? Because they don't have as much of that filtering product in their noses, and more of that toxic chemicals and toxins are going to be surpassed. It's going to bypass that nose, and more of it is going to go directly into their lungs. And so those ultrafine particles like to go deep into their lungs, and it's leading to that increased risk of lung cancer. Looking at cats next. Cats, as we know, they like to groom their self-groomers, and it's what keeps them clean. That's how they self-clean and look clean as well. But grooming can be a bad thing when cats live in a smoking household. Cats breathe in secondhand smoke directly, just like dogs, and of course, they do have smaller noses. But when cats groom themselves, they are also directly ingesting that third-hand smoke residue and particles that fall onto their fur directly into their system. Studies have shown that cats living in a smoking household have 2 to 4 times increased risk of an aggressive type of mouth cancer, which is called oral squamous cell carcinoma. The cancer is often found under the base of their tongue, and that's essentially where the third-hand smoke particles tend to collect after grooming. So of the cats that develop oral squamous cell carcinoma, less than 10% will survive 1 year after diagnosis, even if they've had chemotherapy, surgery, or radiation treatment. So being exposed to this really gives them less than 1 year survival rate, 90% of the time. And so cats that live with people who smoke more than 1 pack of cigarettes per day also have 3 times the risk of developing lymphoma, which is a cancer of the body's immune system, similar to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in people. Um, the typical survival time of a cat with lymphoma, even again with chemotherapy or surgery, is only 6 months. And then looking at fish, so surprisingly, smoking does harm pet fish, so goldfish, betta fish, whatever you may have in your homes. And so how does this happen? Essentially, nicotine is very toxic to fish at any level. So both secondhand smoke and third-hand smoke, as I mentioned earlier, contain lots of nicotine. Because nicotine dissolves easily in water, it can eventually end up in their tank or the bowl and directly poison the fish inside. Fish exposed to toxic levels of nicotine can develop muscle spasms, rigid fins, and loss of color. They may also die from this exposure to nicotine. So just how toxic is nicotine and other chemicals in tobacco for fish? There was an experiment done where scientists put one smoked cigarette butt into water containing 2-week-old fathead minnows. And from that one smoked cigarette butt, in a 2-week period, um, half of the fish died, or excuse me, not the 2-week period, half the fish died within only 96 hours, just from that one cigarette butt. And so moving forward, looking at pet birds. Birds are very, very sensitive to air pollution, especially tobacco smoke. They can develop changes to their respiratory system similar to those seen in children exposed to tobacco smoke. And birds that live in a smoking household are, of course, breathing in that secondhand smoke each time the owner is using a tobacco product. And like cats, birds are also self-groomers. They like to keep themselves clean. And when they do so, again, similar to cats, they're ingesting those third-hand smoke particles that have either coated on, on their fur or their feathers. And birds are also exposed to third-hand smoke by perching on their owner's clothes or hands or absorbing the harmful particles through their feet or by preening their owner's hair and ingesting the particles. Third-hand smoke residue can also completely cover their cage if they do have a cage inside the house. So they're constantly just getting exposed because they can absorb that through their feet. So birds that live with smokers can develop irritated sinuses, pneumonia, allergies, lung cancer, feather plucking, eye problems, skin abnormalities, heart problems, and fertility problems. Some of these conditions, like pneumonia, lung cancer, and heart problems, can lead to death. The other conditions, like allergies, feather plucking, it's very difficult to treat the bird if it's not removed from that smoky environment. And the allergies, the skin abnormalities, feather plucking, while it doesn't necessarily shorten their life, it vastly decreases their quality of life because it's that feather plucking is almost as a stress response because they can't get that residue and that smell off of them, and it's just stressing them out to start plucking their feathers, and it can even get as far and severe as plucking their skin because it just increases that overall stress. Being so sensitive to air pollution, just having their environment, that air being constantly polluted and full of toxic chemicals, it just is not a comfortable way for them to live. And then looking at guinea pigs as well, and they are immune to the effects of tobacco smoke. And so in one study, guinea pigs exposed to secondhand smoke for more than 6 months developed microscopic changes in their lungs, similar to those seen in people who smoke. They also developed other problems like emphysema, a disease where the tiny air sacs in their lungs, the alveoli, then get stretched out and then no longer work properly. They also had some where they found pulmonary hypertension, which is high blood pressure in the blood vessels from the heart to the lungs due to the vessels being too thick or not stretchy enough. In another study, when it comes to guinea pigs, they were exposed to chronic tobacco smoke, and it had led to decreased weight gain due to toxic effects on their metabolism. And the study authors noted that guinea pigs did not gain weight starting 5 weeks after exposure to tobacco smoke. Microscopic lung changes, like those described, also occurred, but happened after the guinea pig's weight gain began to decrease. And so again, just all sorts of household pets, and there's more that I don't even have on our list today, just for the sake of time, that they have multiple health conditions that decreases their quality of life, and it just increases the risk for a numerous, grocery list of health problems. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but when it comes to nicotine poisoning, it's very, it's a very serious concern when it comes to our pets. So nicotine poisoning, it's not only when nicotine is inhaled, but it's also when it's ingested. So how could your pet ingest nicotine? So there's several ways, including, they like to get into things, right? They could eat the cigarette or the cigarette butt, drink nicotine refill liquid, chewing on nicotine refill canisters for those electronic nicotine delivery devices that I talked about earlier, or chewing on the devices themselves. Um, and so nicotine can be toxic even at small doses. Of course, pets vary in size, and so the dose is going to vary on when it can be toxic, and nicotine poisoning can occur. So fatal doses in dogs and cats have been reported at 20 to 100 milligrams, and it kind of varies in between, again, depending on the size of the breed. So how much of a tobacco product would a dog or cat have to eat to reach a dose of 20 to 100 milligrams. So one cigarette can contain 9 to 30 milligrams of nicotine, while one cigar contains around 15 to 40 milligrams. A dog or a cat wouldn't have to eat that many cigarettes or just get into contact with them to get sick or have the effects of nicotine poisoning. Although seemingly harmless, cigarette butts left in ashtrays, at home, on the patio, outdoors, on the ground, might seem, harmless, but these also pose a danger because they still do contain nicotine, right around 5 to 7 milligrams of nicotine in the smoked cigarette butts. So not only can these dogs, cats, other pets get into ashtrays, they can eat cigarette butts, but birds, pet birds, allowed, to roam indoors. If they're not in the cage, they can also get exposed to this and pick at these as well. Um, and so when it comes to nicotine poisoning, some of the signs, as you can see here, include vomiting, unsteadiness, drooling, tiredness, fast heart rate, shaking, weakness, seizures, and death. So if your pet eats a cigarette, more than one cigarette butt, a cigar, chewing tobacco, a nicotine refill capsule, or liquid refilling solution, it is definitely an emergency. And so if this does occur, we have to make sure that these pets are getting to, again, a veterinarian or an emergency clinic as quickly as possible, because it can cause severe consequences or even death. So very, very important. And so I do have a few more slides just talking about prevention and mitigation. And so what we can do, as well as what those people who use tobacco products can also do to help prevent or mitigate exposure for our pets. And so of course, kind of the one golden rule thing that we as a community, as a population, as a planet could do just to completely get rid of exposure is to completely get rid of tobacco products as a whole, and to make it so no one smokes. It's really the only way to 100% eliminate the risk of exposure. But of course, with 1 in 5 individuals in just America alone, being one who uses a tobacco product, definitely aren't there yet. And so we're just going to be looking at what we can do to either prevent, mitigate, maybe just change someone's outlook on how they can prevent exposing their pets, their loved ones, their children, whatever it may be. First thing really is just having difficult conversations. And this can be, of course, it can be with friends, family, coworkers, clients, etc. And so if you know or work with people who use tobacco products, just having conversations, informing them and talking with them about how it can be impacting so many people, just the use of this tobacco product and including pets around them. So many people do not understand or know at all of what secondhand and thirdhand smoke truly is. You'll find it more common and more often than not, people will know or at least have heard of secondhand smoke, but many don't even know thirdhand smoke exists. And if they do, they don't understand that it has such a negative impact on people and pets' health. And so, really, just starting to have these conversations and help guiding them towards a better understanding about the impact of their smoking and how big of an impact it has on their surrounding environments. Knowledge truly is power, and so the more educated people become, the more likely they are to live a healthier lifestyle and make these healthier lifestyle changes further down the road. And then when it comes to prevention measures, just again, as I mentioned, eliminating smoking is the only way to fully protect people who do not smoke from secondhand and thirdhand smoke. But there are comprehensive smoke-free policies that do prohibit smoking, all indoor smoking in public areas at all times. And comprehensive smoke-free laws are policies that prohibit smoking in all workplaces and public places such as restaurants, bars, certain parks as well. And then when it comes to college campuses, or tobacco or smoke they are tobacco or smoke-free. Some workplaces, hospitals are 100% smoke-free on their campus as well, which allows students or the general public to not, kind of roam about, get to where they need to be without that secondhand smoke exposure. And so what could be done? More of these policies and laws could be put in place to more public places, to more just general public places, workplaces, schools, communities, and just trying to make more of a space 100% tobacco product free. And that's really the goal here. And then limiting exposure when it comes to us, of course, being in a smoke-free car, smoke-free home, smoke-free environment as much as possible. And then again, I mentioned parks earlier. Finding parks and public places that your family can visit that are smoke-free, are 100% tobacco product free. As you can see on the screen, smoke-free facility, smoke-free park. And that's really what we want to find and encourage people to go to. And just really all we can do is hope that people are abiding that these policies and laws put into place, and ask people, again, having those difficult conversations, ask people to not smoke around you, your family, your pets, because it does have that snowball effect. We have that secondhand smoke, third-hand smoke exposure. And then it's really just being more mindful, right? Finding places that we visit, restaurants, parks that are smoke-free. And if we do have to visit someone or that, they smoke inside, trying to socialize or asking them to come outdoors will also help limit our exposure. Because of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, all exposure is bad exposure, and there's no safe level of exposure when it comes to secondhand and third-hand smoke. So those were the main pieces I had for you all today. I do want to include this quick link here, ctimaine.org/education, which will give you an opportunity to sign up for one or more of our upcoming trainings or other webinars if you're interested in finding out more about various topics. And then I also have the CTI materials database and online order form that I would like to share with you all, which can be found at ctimaine.org/resources, where you can find, provider tools, fact sheets, rack cards, other handouts, magnets, and stickers, completely free for you all to access. And then also the Maine Prevention Store does have digital and hard copy materials that you can order for free. There you can also get free handouts, posters, stickers, and smoke-free area signs, and that can be found at mainpreventionstore.org. And so here is my last slide, and that concludes the end of my presentation. So again, I would just like to thank you all for being here today, for sitting through this webinar. I hope you were all able to learn something new, or, just find something that it was either a refresher, new information that you can share with your families, colleagues, and peers. And so again, I thank you all for being here, but I also want to thank you all for the work that you're doing in your community. So thank you very much. Alicia, I'll hand things back over to you to wrap it up.
Thank you so much, Derek. It's great, informative, great, wonderful webinar. Thank you. There are a couple of questions. So the first one, are reptiles and amphibians pets affected the same?
Yes, I tried to find reptiles and amphibians. Not a lot of information to find, other than that they are negatively affected. I That was one that I did really want to include on this webinar here today, but I just couldn't find enough information. But hopefully more information will come out in the near future, because while it is unclear, they are impacted in some way, shape, or form. But I do appreciate the question.
Yes, thank you, Derek. Next question is, do fish in river systems have the same impact as fish in tanks when cigarette butts are thrown into rivers? And here I'm thinking about, like captive fish that are, you know, potentially, you know, chomping on a cigarette butt. So tell me what you think.
Yeah, no, I would. they definitely do still pose that risk of exposure to the nicotine butts because as we know, people will dispose of them kind of anywhere and the elements like wind can rain, whatever, can wash it into the rivers and expose that risk. And so fish can potentially, well, I didn't find anything specifically on it, but I can just imagine that that exposure still does pertain. And with our rivers as a whole, looking at secondhand smoke and thirdhand smoke, that residue can it does fall somewhere outdoors too, right? And it is possible that it can fall into those rivers. And like I said, it absorbs nicotine absorbs into the water very, very easily. And so it is possible that they're still getting affected and impacted. But when it comes to pet fish, they're in a much smaller area, right? They don't have as much room to swim around. The water's still, and so especially indoor smokers, that just the potential for risk is much, much greater for the pet fish. But yeah, great question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Derek. Let's see. One other question. Incredibly informative. One comment. Thank you. I'm curious if you know of any research regarding similar effects from combustible cannabis products, given their emerging popularity.
So I don't have anything off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to kind of do some digging and send it out in the post-event email, but I don't know anything off the top of my head.
Okay, no problem. And then another comment that I'd just like to read out is helpful. So many of us love our pets, and it's a good point for them to, motivating those to quit. So appreciate that comment as well.
Yeah.
One other question, and feel free to post your questions here. I'm happy to ask Derek. So when fish are impacted by the nicotine, does this transfer to others when eaten? Do you know the answer to that?
I don't know the answer to that. It's a great question. So, what wasn't one thing I found, but again, be happy to see if I can find any information regarding to that. Because, whether it's I know that happens with pet fish too. Sometimes they once one passes, they could get eaten, but also in the wild. Um, Off the top of my head, I mean I could guess that it may, but I don't want to say anything
Sure.
certain, but I'd be happy to do some digging for you.
Absolutely. And any questions that we're unable to get to, we can certainly do some additional research and send those out through the post event email, as Derek mentioned. Um, One other that just came in. Humans get about 2 milligrams of nicotine from a cigarette. What is the amount for pets?
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
No problem. Humans get about 2 milligrams of nicotine from a cigarette. What is the amount of for pets? Excuse me.
Yeah, that one's a kind of a hard one to track down on too, based off of exposure,
Hmm.
and the size of the pet, and it can vary. So it's hard to say, unfortunately. But like I said, any exposure is bad exposure because a lot of these pets are very, very sensitive to nicotine. And so any exposure is just going to give them those harmful effects. But I'm not sure on the exact number.
Sure. And like you said, I'm sure it depends on size, etc. Any other questions? Yep, just a comment. Third-hand smoke information needs to be emphasized, especially in households, thinking about furniture, walls, etc. I think some of the visuals that you had were pretty um, alarming as well, certainly.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. It's not one that's talked about as much as secondhand smoke and can even go for, secondhand or thrifted furniture and toys. It can get transferred over without even knowing. So
Sure.
great concern.
Yeah, definitely. Would it be possible for a state or a country to completely ban nicotine?
That's what we can hope for, right?
Yes.
That's of course the goal, and it's the best way to limit exposure and risk for both humans and pets. But
Hmm, absolutely. Great questions. Thank you all for your engagement. Feel free to, we still have more time, so feel free to add your questions or comments in. But I just want to thank you, Derek, again for an informative webinar. So this webinar is being recorded. It's going to be posted to our website and available. I do want to mention, in order to claim the CMEs, you must have a profile in Cloud CME. Instructions can be found, in the post-webinar email. And also for those that are collecting CHES credit, it will be sent to NCHEC after the webinar. Only those who registered for the webinar, connected via the Zoom link, and attended the full session will be able to receive the CME and CHES credit. We're required to verify those who attend the full session. You will receive this information and a copy of Derek's slide deck in a post-webinar email. Additionally, as I mentioned at the beginning, an evaluation will appear on your screen once the webinar is closed. We do ask that you take the time, if you would, please, to provide your feedback. We look forward to seeing the comments and statements. So also, if there are any questions that we were unable to get to, I think there were a couple that Derek was going to do a little more research. We will include that in an email that's a bit later from that immediate post-event, post-webinar email. Let's see, I do have any questions. You can definitely feel free to contact us. We do thank you for your participation. Look forward to seeing you at a future webinar or training. Um, I do have one more question that came in, Derek. Um, what about non-combustible tobacco products? So nicotine pouches, chew, dip, etc. Do you think this would have a stronger effect or about the same?
it depends. Really, when it comes to those products, it's if they were to directly ingest it, get into it, eat it type of thing. Um, So, the pouches similar to the cigarette butts can be found, on the grounds wherever that pets could get into, or if it's left on the counter, um, or if someone has, like a spit bottle, even they could kind of get that the exposure from that. And so it would be about the same. I would say it just depends on how much they actually get into. So it would vary from how much they directly ingested.
Yeah, for sure. A comment was made to following this is nicotine is a poison regardless of the form. So that's certainly a good comment. And just some more thank yous. So again, if you have any questions, you can certainly feel free to contact us directly. But thank you for your participation today. And thank you again, Derek, and take care.